Out of the darkness, I opened my eyes in the middle of the night. This doesn't usually happen. To me, going to bed in the evening, I sleep until the morning. Until the insistent sound of the alarm clock wakes me up or I don't get enough sleep. And here I am on you. I raised my eyelids and peered into the darkness. What woke me up? There was a certain feeling as if something was wrong. As if something had happened, but what? I stretched out my hand in search of a smartphone, which I habitually put on a small bedside table next to the bed. It was pitch dark all around, not a single gap. I even pulled back the curtains hoping that the light from the lampposts would penetrate into the room, and at least a little dilute the thick, viscous darkness that made my body covered with goosebumps. It's not that I was afraid of the dark. No, I definitely didn't watch myself. But in this case things were a little different. Realizing that the situation outside the window was no different from the situation in my apartment, I made an attempt to unlock the phone. "What?" I said out loud, at the moment when all my attempts to unlock the gadget were in vain. Strangely, I remembered exactly that the battery charge was slightly below 100%. Maybe it broke or glitched. Okay, it doesn't matter. I got out of bed and headed towards the door, flipped the switch, but nothing happened. I left the room and, by touch and memory, headed towards the kitchen, listening every now and then to the oppressive silence. It's strange, because it often happened that I had to go to bed late at night, and I can say with confidence that even closer to the morning there were sounds outside the window, whether it was the barking of dogs in the distance, or the hum of cars that occasionally but still drive along the highway, and a lot of other sounds. But not today. The only thing that surrounded me was darkness and grave silence. At the moment when I managed to get to the kitchen table, I picked up a lighter, which, by the way, I always left in the same place out of habit. He struck a wheel, nothing, not a single spark. The second attempt also turned out to be futile, as well as all subsequent ones. I began rummaging through the drawers of the table in search of candles and matches, which I had stocked up on for a long time, since it often happened that the electricity was turned off, and it was so much fun to sit in the dark. But what was my surprise when the matches simply refused to light up, as if some invisible force prevented this and tried very hard to keep me in the dark. Spitting on all this, I also moved by touch towards the front door, with the intention of going out into the entrance in order to scout the situation. The moment the door swung open, the same picture appeared to my eyes as in the apartment itself: darkness, though that was torn out, and oppressive silence. Yes, I forgot to say, I live on the ground floor, which in principle played an important role in my story. If my apartment were at least one floor higher, I can say with confidence that I would not go out. And perhaps I would not write this now, but alas, nothing can change. Intuition told me, no, not so. She shouted, "Come into the apartment. Something is wrong here." But curiosity took over common sense. I decided to go outside, which I later regretted very much. Slowly, step by step, I descended from the landing, and finding myself in front of a massive iron door, I opened it without hesitation. Already painfully familiar darkness was waiting for me outside the door. I could not see absolutely anything, not even my outstretched hand, not to mention the neighboring house, the bench next to the entrance, shrubs, and everything else that surrounded our house. Realizing that I would not be able to find out anything, I returned to my den and locked the door on the latch, and then with small steps headed towards my room, when suddenly, an incomprehensible sound rang out behind me. At that moment I froze in place and began to listen. There was a feeling as if someone was boring into me with his eyes. A sense of persecution. My heart sank into my heels, and my body was covered with goosebumps. Sock is already very close, pouring out sweat on shaky legs, knocking down everything in my path, hitting the wall and cabinets. I flew into my room, closed the door, leaned my back and slowly slid down the door. I was trying to catch my breath and figure out what just happened. And what the hell was that? Sock. It rang out under the door, and I covered my mouth with my hands so as not to squeak. After a moment, they began to knock softly on the door, and then slowly, with something sharp, they scratched it. "Open up, I know you're there." I screamed and crawled on all fours, whining, towards the bed, sat down next to her, hugged my knees with my hands, while my body was trembling as if I had just been in the bitter cold in my underpants. Opened the bitch. There was a terrible hoarse voice outside the door, and then there were strong blows, mixed with growls, sobs, and heart-rending screams. And I began to throw away the bricks. He sat like that until dawn. And the knocks on the door and the sounds complementing them did not stop for a moment. Apparently, what got into my home really wanted to get to me, and I couldn't even imagine what would have happened to me in such a case. Silence fell with the first rays of the sun, but I decided to go to the door and listen. Realizing that there was no one behind the door, I left the room and was stunned. The door was in such a state, as if a pride of lions had been hanging out in my apartment all night, and it was this door that attracted them. At the moment when I was in the kitchen, I heard behind me talk. When I turned around, I saw nothing, the same darkness, and then my consciousness left me. Whoever was there, he was able to trick me. He deceived me and took my soul with him. At the moment when I was leaving the apartment, I managed to leave the front door open, thereby allowing him to enter. It accepted it as an invitation. That's why it couldn't get into the room. It can't come in without an invitation, and also, it causes confusion, creates hallucinations, makes you believe in something that in fact can't and shouldn't be, as happened in my case. Well, I was left without a soul. Yes, I live, so to speak, but this cannot be called life. All the colors seem to have disappeared. Everything is monotonous. I don't feel the taste, smells. I'm not happy with what used to be fun. Everything is gray and dull. There are no emotions or feelings. I'm alive with my body but not with my soul. To hell with such a life. Goodbye. P.S. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember, never open the door and do not leave the house. It's not for nothing that they say, my house is my fortress. I hate the rain. The hot summer day was coming to an end. Evening twilight gradually enveloped the village, and with its onset the sky was covered with leaden clouds. The first drops fell. Lightning flashed in the distance, cutting the sky like a sickle, and the earth was shaken by thunder. The drizzle, drop by drop, was replaced by a large shot that drummed on the roof with monstrous force, as if trying to break through it and get inside. I hate the rain, darkness, dampness, mud. Standing at the window and watching this picture, I involuntarily shivered. Usually in this weather you want to eat and sleep. In this regard, I was pleased with the decision to go on a small hike to a mystical place called Kitchen. Why mystical? Yes, at least because you go there supposedly for 5 minutes, and that's it. Consider it gone. They find you a few hours later sitting at the table and stuffing your stomach with various goodies. The aroma of a delicious dinner in the form of a baked rabbit with vegetables filled my respiratory system, from which involuntarily drool flowed down my chin. My father was always good at cooking. Perhaps he liked this activity, but the fact that he is my only parent is not excluded, and therefore life forced him to learn a lot. I don't remember my mother at all. She died when I turned 4. According to Dad, she drowned in the river in about the same weather. She was carried away by the current, and the corpse was never found. I blindly believed him, until recently. With the arrival of rain, the veil of secrecy was also opened, making public the bitter and terrible truth. We sat down at the table and had dinner in silence, thinking about each other, to the sound of pounding drops on the metal roof covering as if on nerves. Drip, drip. After a while, I realized that my eyelids had become much heavier, stubbornly striving to send me to the world of dreams, as a result of which my instincts pulled me to my room, not forgetting to thank Dad for the delicious food. I fell asleep like a baby before I even managed to reach the pillow. That night, my father disappeared without a trace. The next morning, after discovering his disappearance, the first thing I did was to call the neighbors, asking if he had met them. Yes, one might have thought, why did I even decide that he disappeared and did not go on business? You never know what kind of worries and problems a person has. Such thoughts visited me, but it is worth noting that there was one oddity, or to be more precise, several. The first was that the same bad weather was outside the window. The clouds, as if enraged, continued to pour out their insides, turning the soil into a slurping mess. Well, that's okay. But to go out into such an element without bothering to put on boots and a raincoat, well, or a jacket on the extreme, is at least incongruous. All his belongings were left at home, including his phone, which is extremely unlike him. I spent about 4 hours on the phone, calling almost all the villagers, or rather those whom I knew and whom my father could visit, but to no avail. The seemingly harmless rain was now turning into a real disaster, and with it the anxiety was growing. The next couple of hours I walked on pins and needles, wandering around the house, then looking out the windows, then going out on the porch, lighting a cigarette and watching into the distance as far as possible. Because the dense wall of rain did not limit the view so much, my gut told me that something had happened or was going to happen, and she never let me down. I remember climbing the water tower with the boys, which is next to an abandoned factory. It was something like entertainment for us, to climb to the very top and shout, "I am the king of the world." But that time everything was different, as if an inner voice whispered, "Stop, don't do this." And I listened to it, despite the mockery of friends and cowardice. As a result, the rusty iron ladder could not withstand the load, fell off with a creak and collapsed down, taking with it the lives of 2 of my comrades. There were many such cases, but again, Chuka protected every time. So at that moment there was a feeling as if some danger lurked somewhere nearby and was waiting. In the wings. Actually, it was. The evening crept up imperceptibly, and with it the panic, enveloping me more and more. As much as I would not like it, I still had to call the district police officer and report the disappearance of my ancestor, although I knew perfectly well that it would hardly change anything. Andrei Petrovich is smug, hypocritical and lazy enough that even on the clearest sunny day you can't make him lift his woolly balls from a chair, let alone the storm outside the window. After waiting for an answer and taking a deep breath, I began to tell what was what, but the interlocutor interrupted without letting me finish. What he said shocked me, and my body was shackled by fear, primal, sticky and cold. A colossal amount of goosebumps went all over my body and my legs buckled, forcing me to stagger and sit down on the first chair I came across. "Are you all conspiring there? You're the 7th person to report a missing person today." This phrase rang in my head over and over again for several minutes, and I sat on a chair and stared at one point. "Hello, hello." It came from the tube, but I didn't react in any way. It was like I was paralyzed. Seven people are missing," I said aloud, still sitting motionless and with my mouth open. The realization that all this did not come for nothing at once, because even a fool will understand, okay, there's one missing, everything happens, but 7, it already smacks of devilry no other way. After sitting at the table for some time, and being all in thought, I was knocked out unnoticed by myself. A knock on the window, short, not loud but distinct, pulled me out of my sleep state. It seemed to me then, or a branch from a nearby growing tree crashed into the window under gusts of wind. But just in case, I decided to check. It was pitch dark outside the window, only sometimes lightning flashed, enveloping the entire sky, turning it into a huge spider web and illuminating the area for many kilometers. As expected, I couldn't see anything but pitch black. However, when the lightning flashed once again, I managed to notice something. Silhouettes of people. They were everywhere and there were a lot of them. Some were on the road, others near the neighbor's house, a couple of them at my gate. They just stood motionless, as if waiting for something. Suddenly one of them clung to the window. In surprise, I backed away, screaming like a girl. My heart was pounding like crazy. It felt like it was about to jump out of my chest and crawl away. Looking more closely, I was able to see that there, outside the window, in the darkness, my father is standing and looking out of the window. After a couple of moments, it dawned on me that something was wrong. His face, it was different, pale, and his eyes seemed to be covered with a white veil. The mouth was twisted to the point of horror, and a red substance was oozing out of it, resembling blood. He made incomprehensible sounds, clacked his jaw and ran his palm over the glass, staring at me with his lifeless eyes. Our staring lasted about a minute, and then he started pounding on the glass with his hands and head, smashing his face into meat. Then others joined him. I was surrounded on all sides. These devils managed to climb even on the roof and bang on it with superhuman strength. The door was taken out along with the hinges, and the windows all shattered into fragments. It would seem that I don't want to come in, however. Everything quieted down in a moment and silence fell. The freaks stood motionless as before, as if they had been disconnected from the power supply. As for me, I just stood in the middle of the room and watched in horror, and did not even try to do anything. So what will I do then? Well, I'll take a knife, I'll stab one, I'll stab the second. But there won't be enough for all of me. They'll devour me with giblets. Run away. Where to? They were everywhere. I was trapped. After looking more closely, I began to recognize these creatures as my neighbors and residents of our village. They all looked like my father. The same crooked and scary. There was a precinct officer among them. Still forced to go out for a walk, thunder rumbled. The creatures that were at the threshold slowly parted, making room for her. Soon, a creepy creature appeared in the place where the door had previously stood. This was a woman, or rather, she had once been. Right now, it was a walking corpse. Flesh was missing in places, internal organs and bones were visible. There were several tufts of dirty and sticky hair on the skull, curling in all directions under the gusts of wind. One eye was missing. Instead it was blackness, in which worms were swarming. After a short silence, the creature howled like a wolf, and all the crooked ghouls scattered who were, but not for long. After just half a minute, they started flooding my house with rainwater, trying to get into me at the same time. These bastards scooped up whatever came to hand, whether it was a bucket, ladle, basins and pots. The spray flew all over the house, and I ran into my room in horror and hid in the closet, which was in the most remote corner. Now I understand everything, well, almost. Rainwater is a conductor. With her help, this creature controls their minds, turning them into obedient dogs, faithfully serving the mistress and carrying out any order without discussion. I am tormented by only one question: for what reason they cannot enter the house. But apparently this is not given to me to know. By the way, I can guess how my mother died, because the last time such a thunderstorm was recorded was in the autumn of that ill-fated year when she passed away. There was the monster is in the apartment. I learned this story from my friend. She told me this many years ago. And now I'm writing this just to speak out and for someone to read it and think what this person has experienced. In short, I'm telling it on her behalf. It was very late at night. I came home from school, ate, washed and went to bed to look at the phone. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning when suddenly my boyfriend texted me, "Hi, what are you doing?" "Hi, I'm playing on the phone." "And you, also, I see. And what are you playing?" "I'm not playing. I just said that." And so I'm sitting in Snapchat, and I'm watching TikTok corresponded for half an hour, when suddenly I heard a crash in my kitchen. Wait, I have something fallen in the kitchen. I'll go check. Okay, I went to check. Only when I went into the kitchen, I realized that I did it in vain. First I saw my mom, and I asked, "Mom, are you already at home?" And for some reason I didn't hear you come into the apartment. The answer is silence, Mom. I kind of asked a question. Can you answer it? There was no answer again, Mom. You're kind of weird. I decided to pour myself some water and look out the window. Only when I started drinking, I was doused with heat from head to toe, because I remembered that my mother had stayed on the night shift. I slowly turned my head to what was in front of me. I saw something that paralyzed me. In front of me stood something pale, bald, tall, with ulcers and equal pieces on the skin. Instead of eyes to large holes from which thick blood flowed, there was a smile from ear to ear. Long claws instead of legs. I'm even afraid to say what it is. There were guts and other internal organs, because of which the legs were not visible. The head was twisted so that a normal person could not have such a thing. I screamed, locked the kitchen, and ran without looking back. I grabbed the phone and onto the balcony. From the window I didn't want to jump, because I live on the 11th floor. I locked myself in, and all night I stared, without blinking, at the handle of the balcony door. If she twitches at least a millimeter, then on the balcony to the neighbors. It's better to look abnormal than to become a breakfast for this something. In the morning, I carefully went to check the kitchen. It was empty. Only there was a bloody trail from this something and the guts were lying. I didn't clean up because Mom was supposed to return in an hour. I decided not only to tell her, but also to show her. An hour later she returned. I told her everything and showed her this bloody puddle. She believed me and we sold the apartment and moved to another city. I still don't know how to forget it, although many years have passed, but I can't forget it.